What is up, guys? Wisdom for the Wayward Soul here, and today we're going to be talking Lenormand. So I wanted to talk about the 36th card in the Lenormand, the cross. What's it about? How can we interpret it? And what are some visual clues as to its meaning that you might be able to pull from this card? Dive into these questions and more in the video ahead. This is the cross card. Now, when a lot of people think of the cross, I know in some oracle decks and some tarots, when we see a cross, it could be looked at as a religious ideation. It could be looked at as crossroads, the idea of making decisions. But in the Lenormand, the cross is meant to be taken as sort of a negative card. This card is this idea of highlighting a potential long-term struggle. Now let's look at some of the imagery in this card, because while it is not necessarily a super positive card to get, it does have symbols within this card that are indicative of its purpose and its meaning. So first, I want to highlight the trees that are sort of behind this cross, right? Trees are this idea of grounding. It's this idea of roots. So when we think of these trees, they sort of support that message in the cross of this being something long-term, of this being something chronic, of this being something rooted, right? And then we have the cross itself. Now, the cross itself kind of stands out from the rest, but even though it's this idea of your cross to bear, so to speak, even though it's this idea of this long-term struggle, it's also sort of a beacon in this card. It's something that draws your eye. And in that sense, it's something that is identifiable. It's something that you know you've been dealing with. You've probably been dealing with it for a while. So in that way, even though it's going to be something we're constantly have to devote energy to manage, there's this idea that we know what the problem is. We know what the struggle is. And in that aspect, we can manage it well. We can use different tools and techniques to sort of deal with that and mitigate the issues and struggles that might come from this card. Whereas a card like the Fox might take you by surprise, and you sort of have to just deal with the consequences rather than being able to offset that in any way. I also want to mention the idea of this fog in the trees in the background. You can kind of see the little wispiness there, and that can also be indicative of disorientation, hesitation, confusion. These are all sort of words that have very negative connotation. And they could very well be a part of this struggle. It's especially interesting because they're so close to these jagged sort of rocks and boulders that you could very easily fall or injure or cut yourself on. So there's this idea that this is this is going to be a constant struggle. The water isn't clear or crisp. It has kind of this yellowish undertone. So there's this idea that this water isn't really safe to drink. So this is an energy that you want to manage and not immerse in. This also might be an aspect of your life that you struggle with, that from the outside looking in, people won't understand. This is something that you might have trouble getting validation for. And that really adds to the struggle that this card brings. So when we're looking at this, we're not only looking at all the aspects of the card, but how those aspects affect us in our everyday life. And in addition to that, if you're doing a grand tableau, the placement that it's in can be very telling as well. For instance, if you have this placement in, let's say, a worst case scenario in the mice house, right? It's this idea that we may struggle with feeling like we have consistently bad luck. We may struggle with negative and self-detrimental thoughts. This is just one possibility. I mean, we could also have this card in the house of the birds, so we may struggle with making genuine connections with other people. We may struggle with surrounding ourselves with people that are conducive to our growth and our happiness. So this is a card that, while it changes based off of the house that it's in, it will ultimately sort of bring the same type of negative energy to the table. But again, this is a card that does promote awareness. And with awareness comes the ability to mitigate the negativity that this card brings. I hope that helps you read the cross a little better, and I wish you the best of luck in your Lenormand reading endeavors.